Welcome to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. I'm Matt Zemek. He is Crashlet Collier. Wait a minute. No Ethan Inman. Well, he's covering USC women's basketball, the season opener, doing that for Trojans Wire. And, so when there are Tuesday basketball nights, one of Ethan or myself at Trojans Wire, we have to do basketball duty. The other one stays here to hold down the fort here at the Voice of College Football. So short week, Friday night special, Northwestern comes in to the Coliseum and Crash, we talked about this a lot on our Sunday Nebraska review show, but now let's get into it a little bit more. The quarterback situation at USC with Jaden Mayava and Husan Longstreet. And, for those who missed our Sunday show, like there is going to be a little bit of a kind of a rehash on this, just so like we continue the conversation. At USC, no one thinks that Husan Longstreet should outright replace Jaden Mayava, but the real question is, shouldn't Husan Longstreet get some more reps? It's not that dissimilar from the Miller Moss dynamic last season. Obviously, Crash, you're going to be able to talk about that in greater detail as we go along. They're not the same kinds of quarterbacks. Like, it's not the same dynamic that you had last year with Miller Moss and Jaden Mayava, but the parallel is obvious. You have this hungry young guy, and you want to give him reps. You want him to feel useful and needed within the program, and you want him to be developed so that next year he's ready to rock and roll. He's ready to take what Mayava's done this year and lift it to a higher standard. So, Crash, all those things, we're going to talk about them more. But let's just start this conversation and your general impressions of what you're looking for, what you're interested in, and what you might want to see from the quarterback spot this Friday against Northwestern.
Well, Matt, I think it's a really interesting question. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to see us on Sunday, I highly encourage you should go back and watch that episode after this one. It was we had a really great discussion with Ethan about it. So I thought it was definitely, I think, a great place to start, especially for this game, especially Jaden Mayava coming off arguably his worst game as a Trojan. But I think it's a really interesting discussion because we talked about Miller Moss versus Jaden Mayava, and the point I brought up was it was kind of like what Urban Meyer did at Florida in 2006 with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. Leak would get the team down the field, Tebow would get the team into the end zone. And that's kind of what I was wondering, should Lincoln Riley have done that last year, especially when you had a traditional or just a pocket passer with Miller Moss, and then kind of the dual threat ability of Jaden Mayava. Obviously, Riley didn't do that, but I thought there definitely could have been room, especially because USC did struggle in the end zone. I mean, most notably in that Washington game last year, where the Huskies held USC on a goal line stand, and ultimately was that final straw that cost Moss his job. But this year, I think it's a little different because Longstreet, both Mayava and Longstreet, are dual threat quarterbacks. They both have that ability. So it's definitely an interesting thing. I do want to see Mayava get his chance to I definitely want to see Mayava, obviously get the reps. I'm not opposed to seeing Longstreet get used, but if you're going to put him in for one play, don't just run it. Like, everybody knows. Like, at this point, it's if I'm David Braun on Northwestern and they bring in Husan Longstreet, I'm going, okay, you know what? If they beat us with a pass play, I'll accept it. But so have Husan Longstreet pass. Actually let him, just see how he feels in the offense. And obviously, one other thing you brought up, could Longstreet become the starter next year? I'm not saying he can't or shouldn't have a shot at it, but the question does depend. Does Jaden Mayava feel like he's going to get pushed out if, you play Longstreet too much and want to transfer? Does Mayava think he's ready for the NFL? I don't think he is, which leads to the third option is, does he come back to USC for another year? And I think that's honestly, even if Mayava comes back one more year and even starts that whole year, I don't think that's inherently terrible for Longstreet. Allows him to get more comfortable in the system and develop. Obviously, probably 2 years is maybe the max you can wait, but it's definitely something I think the coaches are going to have to figure out. So I think Mayava's got to play most of it. Maybe you mix in Longstreet, but don't be so predictable with him. And hopefully Mayava does just have an overall better game.
Yeah, so boy, a lot of layers of the onion to peel away on this one, Crash. So, you mentioned, the Florida parallel with Tebow and Leak under Urban Meyer 19 years ago. And boy, I'm getting old because that's 19 years ago. But do you think like that's the way for Lincoln Riley to kind of be Solomon and split the baby, as it were, that Longstreet could be this kind of Swiss Army knife? You know, I made the comparison on Sunday's show to Taysom Hill, the way the New Orleans Saints always sprinkle in Taysom Hill for several snaps during the game, often to run, but he has the threat to throw. Do you think that the way to do this is quote unquote normal football versus red zone and special situation football, like you also put in Longstreet on 4th and 1 as a specific running threat, or it should just be the general game and that like you're always mixing in Longstreet generally to certain degrees? Should Longstreet be like the closer, the ninth inning guy, like special situation, or it's just about looking at this as a 60-minute canvas and let's make sure Longstreet gets some opportunities over the course of those 60 minutes?
I think it's more of a 60-minute canvas, Matt. But however, I think you should be using Longstreet kind of, I guess, in a little bit of an arbitrary fashion, where even he's kind of like not exactly ready to run in, just like when the team's in the red zone. What if it's like, hell, maybe you start a drop, maybe he just, what if he just trots out the field for literally after on the opening kickoff, the first play of the opening drive of the game, like for that. But then at the end, maybe you throw him at the red zone, throw him in somewhere at the 50. You get the idea that it's like you just maybe sprinkle him for 1 or 2 plays to kind of throw off the opposing defense. And then you go, okay, then they don't know. Then that way, I think it's a good way to, give Longstreet reps, allow him, get comfortable playing college football, but then also, assures Mayava that he's the guy, he's the starter. He's not going to lose his job this year, which I think, as we've heavily been discussing over the last couple of days, Matt, that he absolutely should not.
Absolutely. Okay, there's a lot more to talk about, but first, I just want to highlight this comment in the chat. Now, folks, just going to pause here. You see the handle, okay? For those who watched me and Tim Prangley last year, do you know who this is? This is a big deal, all right? We can give you 5 more seconds. Who is the person with the handle Janiv Cox? All right, time's up. This is Gary from Dana Point. Gary, so great to see you back on here in the chat. Missed you a lot. Like that just makes my heart full. So we would just want to welcome back Gary from Dana Point, one of the best, most loyal, funny, insightful, witty, just all around terrific USC fans out there. Gary, welcome back. It is a privilege and pleasure to have you here on USC Primetime Live with Crashlet Collier. Just like that's just a highlight of my day right there. Gary from Dana Point weighing in. And Gary's point, interception is going to kill us if we're not careful. And one of the things, Crash, about this quarterback situation, we're seeing Jayden Mayava regress. And the interesting part is, is he just kind of losing his grasp of the fundamentals, because he was so smooth and so careful with the ball first 4 games of the season. And I made the point on Sunday night that it basically comes down to the schedule getting tougher. So with Northwestern being the opponent, definitely expecting a cleaner game from Jayden Mayava. Like if he struggles against Northwestern, and I know Northwestern's defense is not really awful, but really, Northwestern should not have the athletes to hang with USC. Trojans are a 14.5-point favorite. Like if Mayava can't slice and dice Northwestern, certainly a sign of concern. But Crash, as we continue this very important quarterback conversation, you said don't make the patterns predictable. I think that's an excellent piece of insight because you have that Oregon game right around the corner. And I'm not taking Northwestern for granted. I will say, though, it should be a W. I'm not saying it will be, because, again, should and will, there's always a difference between those two things, the possibility and the reality. But, USC certainly should win this game, and it should win the Iowa game. And so with that Oregon game circled in red on November 22nd, it could be for a spot in the college football playoff. You do not want to give Dan Lanning anything predictable. You do not want to have a set pattern that he is able to jump on and snuff out plays with Husan Longstreet. So I really think you're onto something, Crash, with that particular part. So, you want Longstreet to be integrated into the offense, but you don't want to be predictable, and you don't want to limit him to red zone situations. You also said as well, and I agree, he can't just run. He has to throw it a little bit. So let's get into some of the particulars in terms of how we might want to see Husan Longstreet used. Do we want to use him on, let's say, at least one predictable passing situation, just so that he kind of gets that kind of situational pressure, not specific to red zone or 4th and 1, but just like you'll need to put him in on at least one or two throwing throwing situations. And also, do you want to put him in on consecutive plays, not a full drive, but consecutive plays, so that you're able to get him used to that rhythm of, okay, I did this play, and now I need to mentally turn the page and go right to the next play? Or are you just parachuting him in for one play on a first quarter drive, and one play on a third quarter possession, and one play early in the fourth quarter? So lots of degrees, variations, Crash, of those possibilities, or other things I didn't even mention. Any evolving sense of how to use Husan Longstreet as a change-up and a change of pace against Northwestern.
So I think, Matt, you'd made an interesting point about maybe you do just have him do some things that are predictable, helps him get comfortable. But then also, what if when I've said earlier, kind of just sprinkle him in, I wasn't trying to exclude, have him in for maybe 2 or 3 consecutive plays. Obviously, I'm not saying he should be taking command of an entire drive, unless, of course, it's a blowout, at which point, if Jaden Mayava is still on the field, that's a concern of its own that we can that we'll definitely be discussing on Monday if it's game's clearly over and Mayava's still out there. But I think it could be good to keep him in for 2 or 3 plays. Then he, learns how to, have to, adjust and just, have to, be able to call multiple plays. Obviously, he's got the headset now. You don't have to, have everything memorized, or, have to have it sent in. So, he can be in touch with Lincoln Riley and Luke Heward and on the headset the whole time. So I think that helps. But then I think it's just helps him get more comfortable and just learn how it's all right, we're doing this play, then we're doing this one, then we're doing that one. Here's what we do if this happens. Here's what we do if that happens. It helps him just, I think, learn how to just take command of the offense and really just get everyone set up in the right position. So I don't think it's a terrible idea if you even do have him out for 2 to 3 plays at a time during a drive. But obviously, that's something else you should be varying. So that way, whoever the opponent can't just, think, all right, we got Longstreet and he's staying in for 3. Make them stay on their feet with who's going to be on it. So I think there are just so many ways this discussion can go. So it's really fast. Yeah. So it's just such a fascinating topic. When you brought up the point of multiple plays. So I think that's why you got to make that another aspect of unpredictability too.
Yeah. In terms of, let's just talk about Longstreet as a passer. And, let me just say, I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to use Husan Longstreet very much. I'm pushing the idea that he needs to use him more because, we needed to see Jaden Mayava play late last season. Now, as you've explained a lot, Crash, over the past 48 hours, Miller Moss was a kind of a stationary drop back quarterback, and Mayava was offering something different. It's not the same thing with Mayava and Longstreet. They can both run. They're both mobile. They're both dual threat. But what's similar is you do want to get Husan Longstreet, enough live reps, enough of a taste of in-game pressure that when you go into the off season, when you go into summer camp next year, he will have a bed of experience and of teachable moments that's going to really aid in his development. And I know that USC is still playing for the playoff, but Northwestern is so notable, and I think it's the right time to push this idea of giving Husan Longstreet more reps, just because this is the most manageable game left on the schedule. If there is one game where you can kind of take some liberties a little bit, like not be reckless, but at least give this younger guy more of a chance. It's this one, because Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, that's a really tough defense. That could be a really tricky assignment for a young quarterback. Could jeopardize potentially losing that game. And then of course UCLA is kind of its own animal. Like it's the battle for the victory bell, battle for bragging rights. You want your QB1 Maava to kind of own that game, take charge of it. And then of course there's Oregon. Northwestern's like the best chance USC is going to have of, all right, if we sacrifice a few plays or maybe even one possession to give Husson Longstreet experience, we can sacrifice that one possession. Not that it's your intent, but like if the possession or the Husson Longstreet packages don't go well, you could probably still overcome that. The only way you wouldn't is if he throws a pick six, commits an absolutely disastrous mistake. But because you're coaching him up for a small subset of plays, you're thinking that, all right, the worst thing that happens is he throws an incompletion or maybe an intentional grounding penalty. That's not going to lose you a game, all right? So like this Northwestern game gives you the space. It gives USC and Lincoln Riley the space to experiment a little, not a ton, but some on the margins. And so Crash, as we kind of dive more into Husson Longstreet as a thrower, what kinds of pass plays do you think would make the most sense for Husson Longstreet? Because the first thing that comes to mind is a screen, but like he could telegraph the screen so transparently that the defense is able to read it, and that could be a pick six the other way, because if he's just lobbing a screen pass into the backfield and it gets read easily, it could be a disaster. So maybe the screen pass isn't the kind of pass that Husson Longstreet should throw. Maybe it's like a quick slant in, or maybe it's like a short out, sprint rollout pass into the flat. Any thoughts on like what the passing game package should look like for Husson Longstreet, knowing that defenses are probably going to be thinking run first if he is inserted into the game?
So Matt, before I answer, I do want to obviously talk about the obvious one difference is with this kind of situation we're discussing, whereas last year USC season was pretty much done, whereas this year they're very much in contention. I mean, they just came in at number 19 in the CFP rankings that were released about a couple hours ago. So I think there's obviously, you got to factor that into it too. And then Northwestern, I think, is the right game too, like you said, because they're a good team. And I'm going to just say this, it might be a bit of a hot take. I think Northwestern, just despite how badly they handled the whole Pat Fitzgerald thing, it seems like they found some new momentum under David Braun in these last 2.5 years. So I think that also makes it interesting, but also they seem like they're a good opponent because they're good, but they're not like Oregon or Iowa good. And then UCLA, of course, as well. UCLA, and that can just go anyway, especially with how the Bruins are just all over the place with how they've been playing. So, but back to Longstreet, I think there is obviously the argument you do maybe the shorter slants, but part of me just wants, just see him get on the field and just let it rip. So even just throwing deep balls, especially when you have two good receivers in Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, who are going to really, I am confident, do a good job helping him out in, even if isn't exactly a perfect situation. And because Northwestern isn't as good as, an Iowa defense or an Oregon defense, it's a good opportunity to where Lemon and Lane can probably help him and bail him out of if, he does maybe, doesn't nail it quite perfectly or screws it up a little bit. So I think for those reasons, I'm kind of more just wanting to see him just let it rip and just let him just try to just give him some confidence and just stay confident with him in that. I'm not saying obviously mix it up, but I kind of just want to see him just throw a lot of deep balls, really.
And this brings us really to the first non-quarterback discussion point of our show tonight here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. You mentioned Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane. Guys, I'm talking to you. Not Crash. I'm talking to you, Jacoby and Makai. It's time for you to step up. All right, it's time to get the real Makai Lemon. It's time to get big league Jacoby Lane. They haven't been good. They were not good against Notre Dame. They were not good against Nebraska. It is time for the receivers to step up and help out your quarterback. And so like Mayava did regress against Nebraska. No question about it. I'm not pivoting on that. I'm not changing my mind on that. But yeah, he didn't get help. Like Ethan really, in his articles at Trojans Wire really emphasized that particular point. And he's correct. Like it's time for the receivers to be the big dogs. It's time for these guys to play the way they're capable of. And so against Northwestern, which is a good but not athletically overwhelming defense, like this is a time to make a statement. This is a time to, bounce back from that Nebraska game, and it's time to act like big dogs. Mekhi Lemon, at the end of September, I was thinking like, hey, this guy could really win the Biletnikoff award as the best receiver in the country. Right now, I kind of think that's really out of the picture. Like I don't think he's a serious candidate at the very top. Like you probably think that you'd have to think that Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State, or another really another receiver who isn't struggling back-to-back games the way Mekhi Lemon did. That the Biletnikoff seems like a pipe dream at this point. But like if he wants to make a run at it, it has to start against Northwestern, putting up some big snappy numbers and making this passing game rock and roll again. So Crash, in terms of like the larger workings of the USC offense, do you think it starts with the receivers against Northwestern? Like it's less about what Mayava does, it's more about what the receivers do, or do you think it's a little bit more integrated in that? And that maybe that establishing the run game with King Miller first, you kind of take the pressure off Mayava, and you establish the idea that what, Jaden, you don't have to be the superhero in this game. Let your offensive line, let your running game set the table, and then when Northwestern crowds the tackle box, then you're going to have open receivers, and the game's just going to all kind of snap into place. Who do you see as kind of bearing the responsibility on Friday against Northwestern to kind of set the tone? Is this a game in which Mayava sets the tone, or is it more about the receivers? Is it more about the running game and King Miller? Which way do you think you'd go on that one?
So obviously there's certainly an argument for each one, but I kind of think I definitely want to see the run game be aggressive and, have King Miller get his reps for sure. There also is something about this game that we talked about where it's a good game because the competition should be, or just the level of competition shouldn't be as intense as it's been pretty much the last month and a half, pretty much from like the Illinois game till now. The competition hasn't been as intense. So for that reason, I think it's a good opportunity for everyone who's been struggling. Mayava, obviously everyone's numbers have gone down in part because of the tougher competition, but I think this is a game where maybe some confidence is feeling a little shattered after just everything that's happened the last 4 games. So I think this is a good game for everyone to really kind of maybe get their mojos back, build up their confidence again. Obviously, Lemon and Lane are part of that. I think King Miller has proven very fearless in every game, but Jaden Mayava too. So I think there's honestly an argument for each one. I think the receivers definitely need to be better, but then also I think Mayava does need, step up his game for sure. And then obviously maybe you do though, start with the run game and just, get them, just, beat them that way and just trust your O-line to do their job. Obviously there is questions about, will Killian O'Connor be back? Alani Noah went down last game. So, but one thing that has impressed me at this O-line is that no matter who's in there, they just manage to still, keep themselves, they managed to still play pretty well, which has been really impressive considering that O-line is typically one of the positions that takes the longest for those guys to gel and really play solid together.
More comments. Jeff Rodriguez talking about how intimidating this game was in Nebraska, and like USC was on the back foot, to use either a soccer or tennis term. Like British sportscasters often use that turn of phrase. And USC was able to turn the game around in the second half. But as we talked about on Sunday, the Dylan Raiola injury was a factor in that. Like it was hard for USC to get acclimated to that environment in Nebraska. And of course, Northwestern, also Iowa, played in the Coliseum. And Jeff is pounding home the very accurate point that they had just have that comfort zone at the Coliseum. So like just having a mom's chicken noodle soup, just could be the simplest cure for what's been ailing the USC offense. And then, I'm going to highlight everything Gary from Dana Point said. So Gary says, USC seems like they've taken a step forward in the last 8 games, but I think they have to take 3 steps forward to win the last 4. What do you guys think? Well, Gary, I would say this before I hand it over to Crash. Nebraska, I look at Nebraska as not necessarily a step forward, but avoiding a step back. That's how I'd say. Like, USC did not lose ground. It didn't lose the game, but like, it wasn't this dynamic, evolving, forward moving kind of performance. It was shaky, but USC was able to get through it. And that Dylan Raiola injury, in my mind, it played a role. It wasn't the sole determining factor, but like, it was part of the context. Sometimes your opponent doesn't play well and you're able to get away with it. And that's what I felt about the USC Nebraska game. USC not playing a good game, but Nebraska was just a little bit worse in the most important moments. Now, Northwestern, like, this should be a game that's not terrifically complicated. Now, of course, that doesn't guarantee it won't be complicated, but like, USC should be able to get through this game without too much drama. And then we're going to learn a lot more about this team against Iowa, and then, of course, the big one, Oregon, in a couple of weeks. And Gary, we haven't talked too much in recent months. I haven't talked to you since last year with Tim, but in terms of that Oregon game, hopefully what Nebraska achieves for USC is, just by surviving that intimidating environment that Jeff Rodriguez was talking about, maybe that kind of flips the switch with this team. Maybe just the act of surviving. It was ugly, we know that. But when you survive that kind of raucous road game, nighttime environment, maybe that fills a locker room with a new kind of belief, a new kind of toughness that filters through everybody. And everyone, your shoulders get higher and your chest puffs out a little bit, and you think, hey, I'm actually stronger than I thought. Gary, maybe that's the dynamic which USC gains from that Nebraska win. And this team finds that extra level of toughness. When we talk about the 2022 USC team that did so well and turned in a great season, almost made the playoff, you had real warriors on that team. You had Andrew Voorhees. You had Brett Nealon, that Nealon nudge at Oregon State, one of the great plays in USC history, embodying the fight on spirit. Justin Dedich, and all the other guys on the offensive line. Haskins as well, the transfer from Virginia. And Travis Dye was a great leader. And unfortunately, of course, he got injured in that Colorado game in November of that year. But Jordan Addison, he was a dude. I mean, you had so many guys step up and be leaders. And like I would say, Gary, like, we're waiting for this team to acquire that kind of dynamic, that kind of mindset where like just everyone's standing tall as a leader, not by words so much as by example. Like, just imagine Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane looking at their subpar performances the past few weeks and growing and learning from those difficult outings. And this offensive line, which has dealt with so many injuries, like, to me, that's been the most impressive unit on this team, finding ways to get it done each week instead of getting snowed in, which, happened to a degree with last year's offensive line. And certainly it happened with the offensive line in South Bend against Notre Dame 2 years ago, when Caleb Williams didn't have a chance. Maybe that Nebraska game just fills this team with a new belief that builds and grows and increases. And then so by the time you get to Oregon and Autzen Stadium on November 22nd, this USC team is ready to do what it did in 2011 under Lane Kiffin. Go to Autzen and win when not many people were expecting USC to get the job done. So that's kind of my view on your point, Gary. Crash, your general view of can this team take those forward steps needed to get where it really needs to go?
I think I agree with you, Matt, that you said that Nebraska it's not a step back. So, but I think obviously there's a lot that you said there that I really want to, that I really agree with. That obviously I think just by surviving a game and you're thinking, wait, like I'm stronger than I thought. Like it's more just that mental toughness too, that I think that the fact that USC could have just said like, all right, physically I'm exhausted. I think I've done enough, but mentally you just have to stay mentally strong in those moments. And I think that's what that game was. It was really just gritty. And I mean, it wasn't pretty, but I liked while it was certainly an ugly game, like I said on Sunday, what I did like was that they found a way to win. And it doesn't always, and I mean, it got the job done. I'm not saying I want to see that every week, but it got the job done. It's like when you go to a workout and you're just about halfway through, your body's exhausted and you're just like, I'm done. But your mind's like, you're not done. Like your mental toughness keeps you going. I think that's what that game was like. And I think if they can have a couple good games here, build some momentum, and go to Autzen in 3 weeks, that certainly is something. That certainly, I think that mental toughness is there. Because I've said this before about Autzen. I'm not sure if I've said this here, but I've said it a few other times publicly, is Autzen Stadium is the most hostile environment I have ever been in my life. I went 2 years ago with my aunt, who is an Oregon alum. So it's certainly fun, obviously family banter. She probably, kept me, so I didn't get completely, killed or anything, but it was still a fun experience, but it was still just hostile. And because, from what I've been hearing, both from Jeff being there, as well as other fans I know who went to that game that I've been in touch with over the weekend, it's that that whole stadium was really bought into it, especially with the blackout. I mean, that was super evident, especially when after that first Nebraska score, they all released the black balloons, which I thought was kind of looked pretty cool on TV. I will give them that. But I think just by surviving a really hostile environment and a passionate fan base, it gives me confidence that if USC can just keep building and taking the steps needed to keep getting better in the next couple weeks, I think they got a shot against Oregon, especially because Oregon is yet to beat a team that's currently ranked. And I'm not trying to knock against Oregon. They're clearly a good team, but they have the one team that they played that is currently ranked beat them by 10. And people who really watched the game closely said that it wasn't as close as the score says.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana beats Oregon by 10 in Autzen, and that's with Fernando Mendoza throwing a pick six. So, Oregon's offense scored just 13 points, not 20, against the Hoosiers defense. Indiana definitely in control of that game. And you have people in the chat making the point, hey, who's going to win Oregon-Iowa this coming weekend? And that's really interesting because, USC plays on Friday. So then Lincoln Riley and his staff and the USC team, they can all sit back on their couches on Saturday and they can watch that Oregon-Iowa game, the next two opponents. So they get to scout each of their next two opponents on Saturday. Like they get a head start on game preparation as a result of the Friday game against Northwestern. Like they can watch that Oregon-Iowa game live, and then that Lincoln Riley and staff are going to cut up the film on Sunday and the following Monday. And so the game prep for Iowa can really lead USC into the preparation for the game against Oregon. It's kind of funny how it works out that way, but it could be advantageous to USC in a very real way. All right, so Crash and I have been talking quarterback, receivers, and generally offense. So on the other side of this upcoming commercial, a word from our sponsor here at the Voice of College Football, we'll get into the defensive side of the ball and looking at this Northwestern game. So here's a word from our sponsor. We'll see you in about a minute on the other side.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And of course, you can catch our friend Mark Rogers, the owner and founder of the Voice of College Football, 6 nights a week, Mondays through Saturdays, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in Los Angeles, and the rest of the West, here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, if you want to support our channel, VOCFB caps, different kinds. There's that camo cap. Ethan usually wears that cap, and he has that USC underneath the VOCFB logo. You go to vocfb.com/shop. Get all these nice looking items. There's a variety of things you can get. If you get the USC branded items, that supports the USC channel. So it goes to Crash, myself, also Ethan Inman. It's a way to help the channel. And then, of course, the other way that you can help the channel here at the Voice of College Football, you go to our YouTube homepage. So you go to the USC page at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. You click the join buttons right in the middle of the screen. And when you click that join button, you get this pop-up. So join the channel. And if you join at the middle Heisman tier or the top national champion tier, you get exclusive insider access to bonus cuts, bonus segments that Ethan, myself, and Crash have been putting out. And so, on Sunday, our friend Jeff Rodriguez was gifted a membership by Jackson Johnson at the Voice of College Football. So Jeff has access to these insider bonus cuts, and we're going to be doing more and more as the season goes along, mostly football, but also other things under the larger umbrella of USC Athletics. So that's another way to support the channel here at the Voice of College Football. All right, Crash. So other side of the commercial, and we talk about the defense. And so, with Dylan Raiola getting hurt, USC's defense took advantage of that opportunity. It locked down Nebraska. It did its job. And now against Northwestern, and Ethan was really pointed and hammering this point on Sunday. It wasn't our Northwestern preview show, but he briefly alluded to it. Preston Stone, the Northwestern quarterback, he ain't very good. Like, Northwestern can play pretty good defense, but it's really the Northwestern offense which should make USC fans feel fairly comfortable about this game. Maybe not 100%, but fairly comfortable. Again, it's USC favored by 14.5, so that's just more than 2 touchdowns. It's because of Preston Stone. It's because of Northwestern's inability to push the ball down the field in the passing game. So, this should be another game in which USC has an opponent that can't really throw it, that doesn't have a lot of dynamism in its offense. It's time to put the boot on the throat, Crashlet Collier.
Absolutely, Matt. I mean, you make a lot of points about Ethan. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about, alluded to Preston Stone not being obviously kind of the caliber of quarterback of, some of the other quarterbacks that USC has faced this year in the Big Ten, especially Dylan Raiola and some of those other guys. He's definitely even below quarterbacks where we've probably argued, I'd say he's even below kind of the ranks of, CJ Carr and Luke Altmaier, quarterbacks who we kind of have said are only probably going to have good games if USC lets them have a good game. So for that reason, USC just absolutely just needs to just really, I think, make Stone uncomfortable. He's obvious, like what you just said, David Braun, defensive coach coming up, makes sense that Northwestern be good at defense. But offense, USC just needs to just completely just suffocate Northwestern and just make them uncomfortable early. And because of that, you talked about the 14.5 point spread. Usually I try not to look at that too much, but from what I've been just from our discussions, from just my research of this team coming into tonight, that feels about right for where I would probably say the score is going to end up, assuming USC does its job in all 3 phases of the game.
All right, before we continue with our discussion of the USC defense, Crash, we have our National Enquirer moment here on the show. Jeff Rodriguez, Do
My real name.
do you feel confident enough revealing your identity, like taking the mask off?
My real name is Crash, Jeff. Like my real full
Well,
name is Crash Zomner Collier. Like Crashly is like
okay.
I've
Plot
had to show my
twist. Was
I've
not
had to show
expecting that.
I've had to show my driver's license. Unfortunately, I was not expecting this as a question. Otherwise, I would show it right now on the screen. So, but I hope you all will believe me for that. So, but yes, my real legal name is Crash. And for those who don't know, it's from the movie Bull Durham. Great baseball movie. One of my favorite movies personally, portrayed by Kevin Costner. There's a full story to it, just involving my parents seeing Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon at a Broadway show.
All right. Really, really interesting comment here from loyal viewer, listener, Bob Springer. They were doing their job when Raiola was playing. I think we were going to get him anyway. Kind of brings up the point that, like Nebraska's offense wasn't going great guns, but, because USC's offense was struggling, Trojans were down 14-6. And so Nebraska was probably on track to score mid-20s. With Raiola in, maybe low 20s. It just brings up a point. What are you looking at in terms of just, in terms of a score for Northwestern? Like USC should not be allowing more than this. Now, obviously, part of this discussion in terms of Friday night's game is, if USC scores 30, like you put this game to bed, because Northwestern's very unlikely to score 30. And if USC had scored 30 at Nebraska, Trojans aren't sweating that game down the stretch. And so, like, the defense wasn't really that bad to begin with. That's part of Bob Springer's point. It's just that because the offense wasn't doing the job, there was worry about whether Nebraska was going to consolidate and add to its advantage, because the defense, while I'd say decent, was not amazing. But you expect your USC offense to be good enough to compensate. So what are you looking at just in terms of a target for Northwestern's scoring output and the general game flow on Friday night at the Coliseum?
Matt, you bring up an interesting point about just kind of who gets the blame when your team loses. And it's really interesting. I think when things go well, everyone really often looks to the offense saying, oh, they did a great job, right? Kind of regardless. But if it's a bad one, sometimes it's just the defense. I think that's just something that's just how the mind works. I'm not trying to, not a psychology major or anything like that, but it's just interesting that you just brought that point up of just how kind of everyone was perceiving how the game was going, especially with it being such a low scoring affair where it was really more of a defensive game as we actually stop and think about it. But to answer your question, I think USC can't allow more than 20 points if they want to win. And then obviously that goes without saying. The offense has got to obviously do their job and get to at least 30, 35 points to make sure that they, comfortably are, at a comfortable margin where no one's sweating on either side of the ball. So I think that's really, in terms of a defensive standpoint, USC can't allow more than 20 points against the Wildcats on Friday.
I would say personally that, with Northwestern not having a good passing game, like you'd like to think that the secondary is not going to be something that we're going to have to talk about too much after the Northwestern game. That, like, if we're talking about the USC secondary, chances are we're talking about a busted assignment. So, like, hopefully we're not talking that much about the secondary. This should be a game for the defensive line to take charge, to get after Preston Stone, and also to stand tall against the run, which, because Northwestern doesn't have a good quarterback, and everyone knows that, Northwestern very much included, like David Braun has to know, like passing the ball is not our strong suit. You have to think Northwestern's first move, its first line of attack, its first thrust on Friday is going to be with the ground game. So can the defensive line really stand tall? And, Jeff Rodriguez in the chat, it just brings to mind, he's been saying, and I very much agree with Jeff. I usually do, but I really agree with him on this point, that Rob Ryan's transition to and integration into this USC program and this USC defensive staff, it has not been smooth. And like Rob Ryan and the linebackers really have been kind of in the shadows We're not seeing the level of impact that we need to lift this defense to the next level. And I think Rob Ryan should be coaching for his job this month. And, the Northwestern game probably isn't going to be decisive, but Iowa, Oregon, and UCLA sure are, and especially Oregon. Like, that should really tell us whether Rob Ryan is worth keeping for 2026, with that number one recruiting class. Like, it should not be a settled question. It should not be a resolved matter until we really see these linebackers buttoning things down, getting much better on assignments. Lincoln Riley was saying against Notre Dame, we weren't doing the assignments. He wasn't willing to concede that Notre Dame was just physically superior, which was part of it. He was emphasizing the assignments, and that's partly on Rob Ryan. Like, Matt Entz drilled these guys better than Rob Ryan did. I don't think there's much debate about that. Matt Entz didn't have Eric Gentry after the Wisconsin game last season due to injury, so he was working with a lot less, and yet USC's defense was still holding it down. So fewer resources, and you still got decent results from the linebackers last season. What Rob Ryan has done to this point in 2025 hasn't been very impressive, and so you can't settle for mediocrity. And I know Rob Ryan's been there, done that in the industry. But college versus pro is a different deal. Like, it's not automatic that if you teach something well at the pro level, it's going to just translate to the college level. That we can't make that assumption. Rob Ryan really needs to earn his place on the 2026 coaching staff in this game. That's part of what I'm going to be looking for against Northwestern with this defense. Now, Crash, 2/3 of the way through the season, we're now into the second week of November. Like, you have to think that this is the time for freshmen to show that they're no longer freshmen, right? Like, September, you're green and you're getting into the flow of the season. But now, when you get into the home stretch of your first season, like, you're not just a kid. You're not wild-eyed in wonderment. Like, I would have to think that, like, Jakeem Stewart, who he's made splashes at times, this is the time for that ramp up to really begin, and especially with an eye on that Oregon game in a couple of weeks. It's really time for Jakeem Stewart and the other younger guys on this defensive line to really, as they say, kick it up a notch.
I absolutely agree that this is about everything you're saying. Like, Rob Ryan, probably not this game, but the rest of the season should be coaching like his job is on the line. And I think you made a lot of great points about just Matt Entz. Although what is interesting though is the coaches that do make smooth transitions from the NFL to college. Whereas Matt Entz obviously was at the FCS level for a while with North Dakota State, doing great things there, has 1 year here, and he's now doing a great job at Fresno State, wishing him nothing but the best with the Bulldogs. But then you bring up Rob Ryan, who hasn't exactly had the smoothest transition. And as you were bringing that up, it made me think of Matt Patricia in Ohio State, whose transition has been seamless. So It really can just be sometimes, obviously a lot has to do with the talent you've got when you arrive somewhere, but also part of it is just the culture and everything there. And Ohio State is doing all that well. I mean, they're defending national champions. And I think it was just really interesting. As you were bringing that up, I just immediately thought of Matt Patricia and was quickly looked up. All right, he's been out of college for a while now. But pretty much really this game is all about really just USC needing, I think the linebackers and defensive line cannot get sliced up like we've seen at times over the last few games. But then also, those freshmen like Jakeem Stewart, you noted, need to step up. It's all right, it's November. It's pretty much should they even just, they pretty much shouldn't even, maybe they need to not even they got to start thinking all right, I'm one of the guys. I'm not a freshman. I'm a starter. There needs to be some sort of way that the coaches can just hammer in that it's you got this, but you can't be a freshman anymore. I don't know how exactly you do that, but it's pretty much the message has got to be, you can't be a freshman anymore.
All right. So, as we continue to talk more about Northwestern on Friday night, one of the, obvious point, it's a short week. And so with a short week, and that Nebraska game was very physically and emotionally demanding. One kind of thorny part of this game, Crash, is, coming out of the tunnel with really good energy, really good focus. And let's nail this one down. USC was not ready to play at the start of the Nebraska game. USC was able to settle in as the game went on, but first 10 minutes, USC got punched in the mouth. And so to me, that's one very particular key about Friday. Short week, coming off an emotional road game. Will this coaching staff have this team ready at the outset? Like, you don't spend the first 10 minutes getting punched around, wondering what happened. I remember the Arizona game 2 years ago. That was the 3 overtime game. Caleb Williams. USC had to scramble down the stretch, but like first quarter, first 20 minutes, asleep at the wheel. And that happens a number of times under Lincoln Riley. So really big game key for me, Crash. Be ready at the start. You can't get into the habit of waiting 10 to 15 minutes to get into a game. Like, these guys need to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, crisp, focused. And I mean, if guys are banged up, if they're kind of carrying some nicks on the short week, you rotate bodies and you find a way to make sure that, all right, if I'm playing you, you're going 100%. And if you're nicked up, if you're not 100%, I'm going to give you some rest. I'm not going to completely staple you to the bench, but I'm going to reduce your reps. I'm going to give more reps to a guy who's ready to really hit things hard. Like, there are a lot of things kind of bundled into that, but USC needs a fast start, not because Northwestern is, the second coming of anything, but just because you need to get into that habit, especially at Oregon, right? USC is not going to win that Oregon game playing from behind. You need to get into the habit of getting on top of opponents, and Northwestern could provide the perfect opportunity to do that. Crash Collier.
I agree, Matt. I think that you made a great point that USC needs to start strong, not necessarily for this game, but because of the remaining 3 games. Like, it's more like, when you said that, I looked at it more as like, you just got to build a habit. And yeah, it worked against Nebraska. If they start out slow, it'll probably work out. I don't see it being a triple overtime thing against an Arizona team that turned out to be the 3rd best team in the Pac-12 that year. But I'd be concerned if I saw it for what would happen in the next 3 games, because Iowa's got a good defense. If you don't come out ready, they'll take advantage. Oregon, as you highlighted, especially on the road in Eugene, like, that's pretty much what happened 2 years ago when they pretty much were starting to catch up. It was just too little too late. And then, of course, UCLA, they're going to be motivated for that one. So really, I look at your key to the game as more just, what does it say about this team for the rest of the season? So that's why I think it's a really important reason they got to start out strong, because of just the opponents they got coming up, not necessarily because of the one they face on Friday.
I said I'm going to highlight every comment from Gary from Dana Point, so I'm going to live up to that commitment. So Gary says, all right, so how do you get them ready? So let me just be a little bit more specific and precise about Northwestern and this game and this situation and this moment in particular. Precisely because Northwestern is not in the same weight class as Iowa or especially Oregon, Gary, I think there's a real avenue on the short week for Lincoln Riley to tinker with his lineup, and for guys who are a little bit banged up, or let's be more precise, banged up to the extent that you're not sure if you're going to be able to get their best. This is the game to rest those guys. If you face real questions about whether guys can go or not, this is the time to rest them up, because they're going to be needed against Iowa, and they're especially going to be needed against Oregon. So you go down your depth chart and you find guys who are healthy and hungry, and like you have no doubt that they're going to get after it. And so maybe you're not playing your 22 best players in this game, but you're playing the 22 guys who are ready to play. That's how I tackle that question, Gary, about readiness. And it's been a year-long theme. It's been a season-long theme. You could even say it's been a theme since the start of the 2023 season, when USC failed to match the standards set by that 2022 team in Lincoln Riley's first year. Getting accountability from everyone has been a problem. It's been a challenge. Crash said on our Sunday show, Gary, I don't know, Gary, if you watched our Sunday show, our Nebraska review show. It's obviously right here on our site, the USC homepage at the Voice of College Football. You'll be able to access that video, Gary, if you just go to our homepage. But Crash made the point. It's always something. Something always comes up. It's whack-a-mole. You go here and then you go there. And USC needs to get out of that pattern. It can't just be always something. Can we play a complete game? Now, short week, Northwestern, I'm not expecting a flawless performance. And moreover, USC is not likely to need a flawless performance. It's just like, don't flunk, okay? A B- football game should be enough to beat Northwestern. But you're going to need your A game, right? You're going to need that elite level when you go to Autzen Stadium in a few weeks. So USC needs to get to that place. Like, you're not going to get to it right away, and you're probably not going to need it right away against Northwestern. But USC has 3 weeks, or now, a little under 3 weeks, to build to November 22nd, so that when you go into Autzen Stadium, you're ready to deliver a 2011 style performance. Matt Barkley walking into the Lions Den up there in Eugene. Is this USC team, and is Lincoln Riley's USC ready to do something big like that? We haven't seen that under this coaching staff in nearly 4 seasons. So that gets at your point about readiness. Crash, your perspective on Gary's very simple but very important question. How do you get them ready for Friday night against Northwestern?
I think you made a lot of important points that are all correct, Matt. I think really it's about just the team not getting any – you don't want to get anyone hurt, but you also got to have everyone ready, especially it's a short week. And then obviously, I know we've talked also before about just one thing I haven't been seeing as much, but it seems like I hope Lincoln Riley learned from his comments about the Michigan State being that 8 p.m. kickoff followed by a 9 a.m. kickoff all Pacific time at Illinois the week after. Just that complaining usually doesn't help you just say as an excuse. People don't want to hear excuses. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's not ideal that you got to play on a short week, but it is what it is. It's part of what you signed up for going to the Big Ten. If you like getting that $65 million a year check, which I'm quite sure USC does, that's part of it, is the Friday night game. So I think it's just about, you can't make excuses. It is what it is. You just got to have guys ready. Don't want to get anyone hurt. So if you're not feeling like, oh, I'm not sure, don't play them. But then I think also just the whole thing of, rotating guys through who especially are maybe not sure and just not trying to get anyone hurt. But I think really just the big thing is you just got to start out strong in this game, because then it just helps set the tone for the rest of the season.
All right, winding down our show here, and I just have to highlight this point. Bob Springer, always a Dodger fan since 1963. Wow, holy cow. So you've been around and you've seen a lot. And Bob, I'm sure you know this, having followed the Dodgers as long as you have. The only time the Dodgers clinched a World Series championship at home was 1963 against the Yankees in Dodger Stadium. That continued this year. Clinched it in Toronto, a la Rick Monday in 1981 against the Expos. It's really remarkable. The Dodgers, all these World Series titles, but only 1963. Even now, over 60 years later, the only time the Dodgers have clinched a World Series at Chavez Ravine at Dodger Stadium. They won it in Chicago in Comiskey Park against the White Sox in 1959. Really one of the most remarkable things about sports. And so congratulations to Bob Springer and all the Dodger fans in the chat, in the audience here at the Voice of College Football. All right, winding down, and just want to point out that, Ethan Inman, he's covering USC women's basketball tonight, so that's why you're not seeing him. but he's still writing at Trojans Wire, and this is something you'll really want to read. It's his USC football scouting report. So he joined Trojans Wire mid-season, and he does scouting reports each week. So he has his Northwestern offense scouting report up. He's going to have the Northwestern defense scouting report, how the USC offense can get at the Wildcats defense. He's going to have that up on Wednesday, and we record this show Tuesday night. So you want to get Ethan Inman's scouting reports at Trojans Wire, just some of the really good things that Ethan has been writing for our site. Want to let you know about that. And then finally, as we close down our show, want to mention, so this is a Friday night game. We don't want to go on the air Sunday evening at our usual time because it will be almost 48 hours since the end of the game, and it won't be fresh. We're not going to do late night right after game on Friday. Here's what we've decided to do, and Ethan was part of this agreement, this conversation. We're going to do some breakfast football for you on Saturday. So before all the games start, we're not going to do it during games, okay? We would never put you through that. But, pour some coffee, orange juice, scramble some eggs, get some sausage or bacon going in the skillet, maybe some hash browns, maybe a little jelly, whether you do toast or a biscuit, and join us at 8 a.m. in LA and the rest of the West Coast. That's right, breakfast football as we review the Friday night Northwestern game. 8 a.m. in Los Angeles for all you Trojan fans out there, and if you're in the East, well, 11 a.m. So that really won't be hard for you, right? At 11 a.m. if you're a Trojan fan in New York or Philadelphia or Miami or wherever. But 8 a.m. in the West will be our Northwestern review show because it's Friday night, and in that way, Crash, myself, and Ethan, we can just stuff our faces with football over the course of Saturday, and then we can, lie in a hammock on a Sunday and just enjoy the day off then. But anyway, it's breakfast football with the USC Trojans, 8 a.m. Pacific, 8 a.m. in Los Angeles for our Northwestern postgame live show here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So Friday night, it's going to be interesting. There's a Tulane-Memphis game during that one, but that's on ESPN. Northwestern game's going to be over on, I believe, Fox Sports 1. So we're going to be following that game. I think Crash and Ethan are both going to be there at the Coliseum. So that also factored into this. Like, why aren't you just going to do it Friday night? Well, Crash and Ethan are going to be at the game. So that would be a logistical nightmare. Saturday morning at 8 a.m., we're going to chop up that Northwestern game for you here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So for Crashlet Collier, and that's his real name, Crash. We learned something tonight. This is Matt Zemek. Thanks so much for watching us and supporting the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you Saturday morning at 8 a.m. in Los Angeles. Fight on, and let's get a Friday night win.